Hi, it's Mark Melnichuk here again with another one of these, I guess, audio episodic adventures that we're doing at the moment in lieu of the COVID-19 pandemic. And for this episode, I'd like to get into how it's affected the wide world of sports. And I've brought in sports expert and sports editor at the Leader Post, Rob Vanstone. Can you hear me, Rob?
I certainly can, Mark. Nice to talk to you externally for the first time.
Yeah. I've been telling people every time I do an interview with someone over the phone right now, there's kind of this initial "How are you holding up?" and each person is kind of just like, "Oh man, what a strange time."
Yeah,
It's kind of how each conversation starts.
it really is. It's I've never I could never have imagined the events of the last even 2.5 weeks. It seems like an eternity ago that a sporting event was even held, and it's not that long ago, but it seems like another world. And and then to even look ahead and think, when will there be something of that description again? Even the most basic form of competition. Um, there's no handbook for this. There's really no precedent for it. Maybe if you look back to the Spanish flu, but each strain has its own uh, virulence. So who really knows? This is the biggest unknown by far I've ever faced in nearly 34 years since I first stepped into the Leader Post newsroom. Who knows when I'll see the Leader Post newsroom again?
So today we got the news that the CFL is going to postpone uh, training camp due to the pandemic. I'm just kind of wondering if you can talk a little bit about why they made that decision and what that means for the upcoming season.
Yeah, the implications for the season aren't yet clear. Will there be a complete season? Will there be a partial season? Will there be a season? It's really tough to say. But when you hear stories about the Olympics, which were to be held in July, to begin July 24th, when they're not going ahead, when crossing the border is such an issue, and a lot of the players in the Canadian Football League are Americans. A lot of the coaches are Americans. I just don't see how it's practical to make plans based upon that. And that was my outlook, by the way. I'm just going to click out of my email so we don't have any more dings. So
No, that's okay.
yeah, it's the prudent thing to do. If they're able to begin training camp, say a week or two later than that, does that mean maybe they could get the entire season in if they perhaps skip a bye week or two? Could they skip the exhibition games, things like that? Randy Ambrosi has said that the league doesn't plan to move the Grey Cup back, and considering what the weather can be like in Saskatchewan in November, uh, that's probably a smart thing. So if you presume that November 22nd is fixed as a Grey Cup date, that's where you work. That's a date from which you work backwards. I would be happy to see a season period, and that goes for pretty much any sport, because you really wonder. And I don't pretend to be a medical expert or anything like that, but if you hear what's happening in New York, and Governor Cuomo is talking about how they're 3 weeks away from the number of cases peaking, so it's got to reach that crest, and then it's got to come all the way down, not just in New York, but in every state, in every province, in every territory, probably in every country. As soon as you try to resume a normal way of life, I think it's got to doesn't it have to be down to zero before there's a you can say, okay, let's just proceed with life as normal. As long as it's out there, how do you have a normal life? And even if they were to say determine that a certain level is acceptable, to what degree would there be wariness on the part of athletes, on the part of fans? Uh, the whole economic model, or a lot of the economic model for so many professional sports, especially a gate-driven league like the Canadian Football League, is based upon people in the seats. And would there be a disinclination for people to go once it resumes? So I'd be happy and relieved if there was a partial season. I'm not sure really how much they can realistically hope to get in, because this has got to peak before it can dissipate, and who knows how long that'll take.
People will know if they've ever watched any of the Green Time Machine episodes that we've done that you've got quite a knowledge of CFL history. And I'm just wondering, this is so unprecedented, but has anything like this ever happened in the history of the CFL before where, you know, events in the world came down and started putting a hamper on the season on the CFL to be able to hold games?
Well, the precedents involve the world wars, 1917, 1918, 1942 to 1944. There were military and service teams when the Rough Riders per se were on hiatus, but you have to go back to those two global confrontations to find anything approaching a precedent. After 9/11, they had to cancel or postpone some games in order to, because of that obvious, the magnitude of that tragedy. And the Rough Riders were to play in Calgary, and they spent a few days in Calgary before playing at McMahon Stadium in September of 2001. But there weren't any games canceled as a result of it. Riders have played every game that they've been scheduled to play since 1945 when they were still the Regina Rough Riders. That's how long it's been. Um, so there's in 1974, training camp was disrupted for a very short period when the CFL Players Association went on strike, and there were some workouts missed there. But that's the only precedent for training camp being affected that I'm aware of. So I know it's been said many times, but this is a new world, and who knows where it's going to go.
Now, you know, the CFL hasn't gotten started yet. It's still a little ways off, but way in local sports that we have seen it already, we've seen the impact already happen is with the Regina Pats. Can you just talk a bit about now I got to shut my email off. Can you just talk a little bit about what ended up happening to the Pats because of all this?
Well, they had a few games left, not a lot, and there was a season in which they weren't going to make the playoffs. And the Moose Jaw Warriors were in a comparable situation. The Swift Current Broncos, the teams in Southern Saskatchewan weren't that heavily impacted. There wasn't going to be a lot going on in this region of the province. But you look at the Prince Albert Raiders, the defending WHL champion, icing a very good team again this year, and you'll wonder what could have could have happened there. The WHL is able to go ahead with its Bantam draft on April 22nd. The Pats will pick 15-year-old, soon to be 15-year-old phenom Connor Bedard first overall. But there won't be a Memorial Cup. I mean, that's amazing to me. They've just ruled it out completely. And you look at, especially I think in the case of the Raiders, they're a community-owned team, and revenues are never robust for a community-owned team. It's amazing what they've been able to do to keep things afloat there, and to keep the franchise at such a high level. And suddenly, those playoff gates, when attendance is so vital to them, not having those playoff gates, you wonder how a team like Prince Albert will be affected. The Regina Pats comparatively are in a pretty good situation because they've got five owners, all of whom are affluent. So, from a financial standpoint, I'm sure there's going to be an impact, but on the individual owners. But and who knows organizationally what teams are going to do to get through this period where everybody's on virtual lockdown, it seems. But I think the larger impact would be felt by teams that not only were looking forward to the playoffs, but an extended playoffs, such as Prince Albert.
And then one thing, I mean, I know it's not as high profile, but it's something I think about when I look at how this is affecting young people, like high school students. Obviously, there was a lot of labor disruption that was going to start happening pretty soon with, with what's going on between the teachers and the provincial government right now. But have you been kind of keeping your eye on it all about what this has kind of meant to just like the local sports world in Regina, like with high school sports?
Yeah, I mean that season would have pretty much, in terms of you know really high profile events, would have concluded in late March with Hoopla, the provincial championships, and those were to be held in Regina. And it was so unfortunate even before uh, the COVID-19 influenced everything. I felt so sorry for those kids, especially the grade 12s who were going to be unable to take part in that event. I felt sorry for myself because I love covering hoopla. It's one of my favorite sporting events. I used to on my own dime drive to Saskatoon when it was there just to cover it because I loved it so much. And so I think I felt even personally deprived of something with the fate of Hoopla. And another event that's always a lot of fun is, or two other events, are the city and provincial track and field championships, and that's late May for the cities, early June for the provincials. And again, who knows what's going to happen there? Not only with regard to because of the teacher situation, but with the with COVID-19, I would hope they'd be able to get the track and field in because it's always such a fun event to cover. But again, who knows? It's one of the first signs of spring around here is always an email from a great gentleman named Matt Johnner, who advises me every year, as did his wife Bernice, that it's time for the Regina Ladies Softball Association season to start. Are you okay? Is it okay if we send results again? And it's always, yeah, please, sure. That's always been a rite of spring for me to hear from the Johners and know that, okay, it's officially spring. Regina Ladies Softball Association is beginning, and that's usually early, late April, early May. The Regina Red Sox would be getting going, and or hopefully will be getting going in May. There'll be the same border issues there, though, that the Rough Riders would face because of the amount of American players. So this is generally a slow period, local sports wise, unless the Pats are enjoying a long run. Can you imagine if this had happened in 2017 when the Pats had that magical team that won 52 games, or 2018 when they were playing host to the Memorial Cup? That would have been awful for the Regina Pats. 2018 would have been awful for the Swift Current Broncos, for the Moose Jaw Warriors, who had such a strong team. It's a lighter. This is a lighter year locally. There really isn't a lot going on. It's um, generally things we use this time of year in sports to work ahead on some projects. I'd had some plans to use this slower time to work on some projects surrounding the 2020 Grey Cup, but again, everything is in question now. I look forward to the day when no matter what the event, there will be a sporting event to go to, and I really don't care if it's the South Central Saskatchewan Underwater Cricket League. I will, if that's the first sporting event being held after the all clear is given. I will be there with a snorkel.
Well, Rob, like just me myself, I'm not like the most massive sports fan, but you have my sympathy. I can't imagine what it's like to have video games. Everyone's still able to stay inside and play video games. My hobby didn't involve going out anyways, but I can't imagine what this is like to have for all the sports fans, people that are involved with sports in the world, to have that world just thrown out of alignment so chaotically. It's got to be pretty weird.
It is really
Um,
weird. We've dealt with it like episodically over the years. For example, in 1981, Major League Baseball went on. The Major League Baseball players went on strike. That happened again in '94. There wasn't a World Series in '94 as a result of the strike, and that might have cost the Montreal Expos not only a title but their ultimately their existence. There's the NHL had a season wiped out because of a lockout, and they've had seasons shortened. In 1982 in 1987, the National Football League seasons were shortened due to labor unrest. There was a specter of that perhaps happening last year in the CFL when it sounded like the Canadian Football League Players Association was going to be more aggressive than it had been in the past. But ultimately, nothing came of that. So we've dealt with it sport to sport, or from in specific sports over the years. But when you're looking at the whole spectrum of sports, everything's gone. Suddenly, there's no sportscasts to watch. Suddenly, uh, it's the thing that I've been doing for a living, and not only that, something that has basically been my hobby as far back as I can remember is gone. And it, when your livelihood depends upon writing about sports, it's a pretty empty feeling. But I look at the people who are in situations where they're working for businesses that have been closed, and just people in situations that are far worse, infinitely worse than me, sitting here thinking, "Gee, I wish there was a New Jersey Devils Carolina Hurricanes game on to watch tonight." I still think, you and I, people who work in the media, I still think we have it pretty good compared to people who are really suffering financially, emotionally as a result of this. And you think of the people too that whose jobs don't allow them the luxury of working from home. I was just at the bank today dealing with my mom's estate at CIBC, and talking to Amar Prasad, who's been so amazing helping us deal with mom's estate. And they're doing things on 2-week rotations at CIBC. And you think of people working at the grocery stores. I think of my doctor. His office is still open. You think of especially the healthcare professionals, policemen or police officers, et cetera, et cetera. All the people who don't have the luxury of saying, I'm just going to go work in my recliner. They've got to deal with the public every minute, often hands-on and often within that 6-foot radius. And I have more respect than ever for the people who are in those situations. And I hope they all emerge from this healthy and safe and with a uh, minimum of disruption to their lives, and
Yeah,
none at
yeah,
all, preferably.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Well, I think that's going to do it. I think we got everything, man. I think that was good. Thanks for taking the time to speak with us.
Always a pleasure, Mark. I'll send you my bill very shortly.
Oh, that'll be great. Okay.
My
All
prices are
right.
very reasonable, believe me.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Rob.
My pleasure, Mark. Take care.
So that was Rob Vanstone, the sports editor at the Regina Leader Post. If you want to listen to last week's episode, I sat down with Murray Mandrick, the political columnist, to get an idea of how this is all playing out politically in the province. And yeah, we'll probably do another one of these next week. At least for the foreseeable future. As I've said before, we aren't working out of the office right now. We're working from home, so it kind of limits our ability to do videos and the regular type of programming you might usually see on our YouTube channel. So yeah, be sure to stay tuned to the YouTube channel for more of these, and you can also get your news as it relates to the COVID-19 pandemic in Saskatchewan and just general news in Regina and Saskatchewan on our website and in print. You can also find us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thanks. Bye.